Unless you have been living under a rock in recent years, then you are probably aware that car prices have been rising at record rates the past few years. From March 2020 until now, the average new car price has risen some 30%, which is outrageous. But there is an even equally as alarming statistic that we are going to dive into in this video, and that specifically has to do with American muscle cars. We are going to take a look back and see what all of your favorite muscle cars cost back in the 60s and 70s, and then adjust that price for inflation and compare it in 2024 dollars to what you can get today from the same manufacturers and see whose prices are the closest. And trust me, you might be a little ticked off after seeing some of these numbers. So let's dive in. Starting with Ford, the obvious first choice has to be the Mustang, as the car is still in production to this day. Beginning in 1965, the Ford Mustang was available at a base price of $2,320 for a six-cylinder manual coupe with absolutely no options. Adjusted for 2024 dollars, this means that this car costs the equivalent of $23,353 in today's money if you were to have bought it new. Now that sounds like a good deal, but when we compare it to the cheapest EcoBoost Mustang on sale today, you would see that that car costs $31,920, which is a difference of $8,567 in buying power needed to purchase a base model Mustang today compared to 1965, which means that all the new technology, emissions equipment, safety equipment, and other stuff makes the new Mustangs 30% more expensive than their classic brothers would have been. But that's just the base model. What about V8 GT? Well, a base model 225 horsepower, 289 powered fastback with a 4-speed and disc brakes would have cost you $3,000 in 1965, or just shy of $30,000 in today's money adjusted. Now, while a fully loaded 289 Mustang with air conditioning and an automatic and lots of other bells and whistles would have been around $3,600 in 1965 money, which is about $36,000 in today's money. Now, the V8 Mustangs of today are where this biggest price disparity happens, because for a 2025, a base model Mustang GT is $45,460. That means for a base GT with no options at all, you would need effectively 50% more buying power today than you did back in 1965 to afford a new V8 Mustang. In fact, if you take a 2025 Mustang GT and its list price and convert it back into 1965 dollars, it would be $4,500, or the same price of a GT 350 at the time. A fully loaded 2025 Mustang GT Premium without any crazy special upgrades outside the performance pack is $60,000, a whole $24,000 more than what its 1965 equivalent would be adjusted for today's money, which is crazy. That represents a 66% buying power increase needed to afford a premium package, nicely optioned Mustang GT. But Ford isn't the only offender here. But let's see how they stack up to Chevy with the Camaro and Corvette. Now, since the Camaro has officially been killed off again, we have to use 2024 numbers to price the cars relative to their historical values. A base 2024 Camaro cost just under $31,000 new, or effectively $3,270 adjusted for 1967 money. But how much did a 67 base model Camaro cost when it was new? Well, it was $2,572, which is equivalent to about $24,000 today. This means that 27% more buying power was required to buy a new base model Camaro today than it would have been back then, which is slightly better than the Mustang, albeit not by much. An SS350 Camaro would have cost you about $3,000 in 1967, which is around $30,000 in today's money. The most comparable modern Camaro to an SS350 would have been the 2024 Camaro with the 1SS package equipped, which cost $44,000 in today's money, or $4,600 in 1967 money adjusted. Now, these are very similar numbers to the Mustang GT in terms of buying power increase required to afford a new base SS Camaro. About 50% more buying power is required today to get behind the wheel of a performance SS Camaro. And a well-equipped 2024 Camaro 2 SS would hit the high $50,000 to low $60,000 range today, just like the Mustang, which puts these two cars nearly in a statistical dead heat for the increased buying power required to get one. But what about the Corvette? Well, since the new Corvette is a mid-engine car and it's wildly different than its old-school counterparts, this will be a bit less of a scientific comparison, but here we go. For the sake of continuity, we will compare a 1967 Corvette to the 2025 Corvette, with the 1967 Corvette at a base level with a 327 and a 4-speed. This car started at $4,388 new, or adjusted for today's money, about $41,000. The C8 Corvette starts its price at $68,000, which means that you would need 65% more buying power today to be able to afford a base model Corvette than you did in 1967. And for comparison with the top dog Corvette, the L88 Corvette, with its absolutely legendary 427 in it, cost $6,000 back in 1967. And that was still considered prohibitively expensive for a Corvette. Well, $6,000 in 1967 is the equivalent of about $57,000 today, which is still less than the base model C8 Corvette. With the new Z06 Corvette starting at $110,000, that means you would need nearly double the buying power now to purchase the top dog Corvette, which is absolutely crazy. And that doesn't even factor in the new Corvette ZR1 for the C8, which is way more expensive than the Z06. Clearly, all that performance and new tech that the Corvette offers certainly comes at a premium. But now, let's check in with Dodge. The Dodge Charger and Dodge Challenger will be the two comparison vehicles for the Mopar category, even though they are also technically out of production now. And we won't be touching on the new inline 6 and EV versions of the Daytona because, well, it hurts my soul to talk about. For the Charger, we will use prices from the 1968 model year because that's when the more iconic body style started, as opposed to the 66 and 67 model year. In 1968, the base price for a Dodge Charger was $3,014, the modern equivalent of about $27,000. The 2023 Dodge Charger base model, which was the V6 SXT, cost $35,325 today, or the equivalent of $3,800 in 1968 money, which means to afford a base model Charger, you would need to have around 26% more buying power today than you needed back then. But what about the performance versions? Well, a 440 4-speed 1968 Charger RT started at around $4,000, which adjusted for today's money is about $36,000. This would roughly be the equivalent trim-wise to a Charger Scat Pack with the 485 horse Hemi, which started at about $52,000 today. Adjusted for 1968, that would be about $5,752. So you would need about 42% more buying power to afford a high-performance Charger. A well-optioned 426 Hemi car in 1968 was around $5,300, or $48,000 in 2023 money. The comparable vehicle to the period Hemi Charger would have been the Hellcat, which in 2023 started at $72,000 for the Charger, which adjusted to 1968 money is just under $8,000. And as we've seen on this list time and time again, the higher the performance that you go, the higher the buying power discrepancy becomes. And that's no different for the Charger. Today, you would need over 50% more buying power to afford the highest performance Charger without any options. And last but not least, the Challenger. Now, while the Challenger and Charger are priced pretty similar today, back in 1970, the base model Challenger was only $2,851, a measly $23,000 in today's money, whereas the actual base model SXT V6 Challenger for the 2023 model year retailed at $33,000, which means it was the equivalent of $4,000 in 1970 money, representing a 40% buying power discrepancy. which is the second largest from any base model car we covered in this video, behind the Corvette. A decently optioned RT Challenger in 1970 would run you near $4,200 then, or $34,000 today adjusted. We will use again a contemporary Scat Pack, in this case a Challenger, as the equal comparison vehicle for this. And that started off at $48,625, which adjusts to $6,000 in 1970 money, which, if you do the math, represents around a 42% increase in required buying power to buy a brand new high-performance Challenger. A 426 Hemi Challenger in 1970 would have set you back $5,200 with a bunch of options, the equivalent of 42 grand today. Whereas a base model Hellcat in reality was $71,000 new for 2023, which means that you would have needed $8,766 in 1970 essentially to have afforded the top dog Challenger if it were priced as it is now, which is a 60% higher required buying power. As you can see from the cars I went through on the list, the reason that it feels like you can't afford a new muscle car like you could years ago is because, well, you can't. The buying power required to get the modern equivalents of these cars new on the low end was 26% higher. But in actuality, to get the cars that we all want, i.e. the performance versions, we need to be making the equivalent of probably 50% more money in most cases to be able to afford a similar trim level nowadays. Now, yes, there is a lot more technology and safety features included in the new cars, and they handle better and have nicer interiors. These are all valid points, and I'm not discounting them. We should be paying more for all that extra stuff. But that doesn't change the fact that it is mathematically harder now to afford your dream muscle car than it was back in the 60s. And let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this breakdown. Did it surprise you, or was this about what you expected? And thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and sharing the word. But we'll see you next time, everyone.